everyone. Welcome to Pi People 23. Great to see so many of you joining us here. This evening, we're going to be talking about creating without waste. It's all about Planet Centric Design. We'll be sharing some tips for how the needs of the planet can be designed into the products and services we all create. We hope you'll leave with an understanding of some practical changes that you can make as designers or developers or product people or humans. And we want this to be a useful and inspiring event for all of you. First of all, just some housekeeping. My name's Anoush Jakeman, and this is my colleague, Anne. We're both senior service designers here at Frog. So it's our first time broadcasting via StreamYard. So please bear with us if we face any technical challenges or more likely user difficulties, as I'll be controlling that. Hopefully it'll be smooth. Please add any questions and comments into YouTube as we go along. You might be prompted to add a channel in YouTube. Just click on it and then you're in. Just post any questions. Please don't let adding the channel thing put you off. We'd like this to be a conversation too. So first, our big announcement about IDEON joining Frog. So this means no more IDEON, but we're taking our team and 20 years of design thinking experience over to Frog. As many of you will know, Frog is a global design and strategy leader with over 50 years of experience. This union means access to an even bigger global team with the same dependable capabilities, as well as brilliant people in new areas of expertise. So together, we now make a family of strategists, designers, technologists, brand experts, and data scientists. Together, we've worked on clients as diverse as Apple, Barclays, 3, Disney, Audi, UNICEF, IKEA, and AXA, and that's just to name a few. We're super excited to see what the future holds for us, and we hope you are too. And if you are super excited, we are hiring. So we're looking for service designers, lead and mid-weights. If you're interested, please reach out to Valeria or Sophia. Their contact details are here. And for product designers, lead and senior, please take down Jen's email address. And now on to this evening's agenda. So we have some great speakers lined up. First, we're going to hear from Cara Pecknold. She's the global head lead of sustainability of Frog, and she'll briefly introduce us to Frog's sustainability story. She'll give an insight into some of the work we'll be tackling as a Frog team. Then we'll hear from Jessica Carta, who's head of product at Treecard. She'll share how her team are building a leading green financial services company that makes impactful and sustained climate action every day. After that, we'll hear from Tom Greenwood, author of Sustainable Design. He's the co-founder of Wholegrain Digital, a certified B Corp, and he'll be sharing the small changes we can make to build faster, more carbon efficient websites that are not only better for the planet, but better for people too. And then finally, we'll have Zoe Lester, product designer here at Frog. She'll be joining the dots between behavioral science and sustainability to show us how a practice of self-reflection can help us all become better, more sustainable designers. There'll be lots of stories, tips and tools, so please ask questions in the comments as we go. Each of our speakers will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes for questions and answers. We should be wrapped up by about 6 p.m. I hope you enjoy the evening. So let's get started. So, Cara, over to you.
Hello, and thank you so much, Anoush and Anne. It's really great to be here. It's really exciting to be here on a day where we're joining forces and growing in our capabilities, and especially in the area of sustainability and planet-centric design. I think the way we look at sustainability at Frog is an opportunity to leap, literally, yes, I use the word leap as a frog, to a next economy. And I'm excited to have a new team of people, and as well as the speakers tonight, to be able to highlight what it really means to leap to a next economy. When we talk about this, we are really considering a different world, a world where social, environmental, and climate impacts are accounted for, and we as designers are taking on that role. I'm excited to also celebrate that Frog was born in a forest. I don't know if you know this, but in 1969, a small group of designers started a company. We were not Frog back then, but in Germany, the Black Forest of Germany, in fact, which is highly beautiful and nourishing and nurturing to your soul if you've never had a chance to be there. I'm based in Munich, so I've had a chance to be in the forest. But I think this is a great metaphor for being very connected at our roots to that which has given us life and air, the air we breathe, and being part of a larger forest today as we grow in our teams. And I like to think of sustainability as a creative act. There's a lot of discussion around net zero and strategies, and I'm not against those things. They're really important. Those frameworks help companies and communities align to a common goal. But what I think is really powerful about the design community is that we can use it as a creative catalyst for change and for helping our clients, for helping our communities, building things that are beautiful and building things that have a real impact. So I hope you join me in this idea of being a force for creativity when it comes to the transition in the world we need today. But I also realize we're not all at the same place. I have taken the last year to really grow and shape my own career, to grow and shape my own understanding. And I love this framework, which actually is dated the same year that Frog started in 1969. So I think we have some reliability when we think about in the top quadrant being unconsciously incompetent. I don't know what I don't know. And so I don't know how to make a change. But as I move around the circle, I'm able to, once I have more knowledge, become more competent. And there comes what I would call sort of a euphoria, a Zen moment, when we're unconscious that we're so competent. And this excites me about this part of the work that we can do as designers collectively. And the last thing I'll really say is this isn't a new story. The exciting thing is we have many people who have gone before us. Victor Papanak is one of my favorites. Design for the Real World is an amazing book if you haven't read it. But if it is to be ecologically responsible and socially responsible, it must be revolutionary and radical. And I think we are in a good company tonight with people who are revolutionary and radical. And I wish you all a really lovely evening. And as you step forward, I hope you will also, like us at Frog, be able to make your mark. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Cara. And I love the fact that we're joining a big Frog family and be able to actually pave the journey towards creative or being creative catalyst for change, as you mentioned. So with that being mentioned, I'd love to actually introduce our first speaker, and that is Jessica. I'm a big fan of Treecard, especially of how this business had managed to actually weave in the sustainability angle at the heart rather than doing it as an afterthought. And we see more like the sustainability-led businesses nowadays. And very happy to have Jessica joining us and share the inspiring story of how it all started. So over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Anne, so much. And thank you, everyone, for joining. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I was so thrilled to be invited to speak on this talk. So thank you so much for everyone who's joining around the world. I'm not sure where everyone is based, but I'm calling in from New York. So really excited to tell you all about Treecard. For those who may have heard of it and for those who are new to it, it is a brand new company that is launching in the United States this summer. So I'm excited to share with you a little bit of a sneak peek about what we're all about. Before I get started, happy to introduce myself to all of you. Like I mentioned, I'm based in New York. I am the head of product at Treecard, and I have a long history working in financial services, payments, card products, but also from a social impact perspective. So working at Treecard really is a blend of both my passions and my skill set. And prior to joining Treecard, I worked at MasterCard for 6 years, exclusively in different product roles. So I'm deeply familiar sort of with payments and card solutions. And prior to joining MasterCard, I worked at another very early stage company that also was very focused from a social impact perspective. So Treecard really blends those two passions of mine together. And let me dive in and tell you what Treecard is all about and how we use sustainable practices in our product and really in all of our operations end to end. So Treecard is powered by a company called Ecosia, which is one of the world's largest search engines. I hope some of you have heard of it. I hope you all will explore it and use it after this call. They're a really fascinating, fantastic organization that provides a search engine. And every time you conduct an internet search using their software, they plant a tree. So it's really cool, super easy to use, super easy to implement as your default search option. And they have invested in Treecard, and we are effectively their exclusive finance brand spinout that has a very similar mission and operations. Ecosia is headquartered in Germany. And so they have a really large active user base across Europe, and they're available all over the world. And so we're excited to partner with them as our exclusive reforestation partner. So I would encourage all of you to check them out. They're a really fantastic company. So what is our product? Our first product that we're launching in the market is a wooden debit card that reforests the planet every time you spend. So it's that simple. We're so excited to be one of the first companies in the entire world that actually offers a real wooden card. The wood that we've used for our physical product is made of sustainably sourced cherry wood from a producer in the United Kingdom. And all of this will be, fully functioning debit card that works at an ATM, that works at any merchant worldwide. So we really think about product at Treecard from both the physical perspective, because we are actually providing a physical item that you can hold in your hand. So we have to think about sort of how we've created that from a sustainable experience. But we also have our digital mobile application as well. So we have a lot of both physical and digital elements that we think about, which is really fun and exciting. Our goals as a company are audacious and bold. And our first and sort of foremost goal is to plant 1 billion trees. When we think about fighting climate change, one of the simplest yet most effective mechanisms to fight climate change is reforestation. And we are so excited to partner with Ecosia to do this. They have 30 tree planting sites across 60 countries. And so we feel really confident that if we can embed the concept of reforestation into people's everyday financial habits, we can plant 1 billion trees in 5 years. And so that's sort of our paramount quantitative objective. But we also want to shift the paradigm. I think when a lot of people think about their daily financial life and their bank and how they save money and spend money, they don't necessarily associate that with climate change, but they should. That's really, I think, what could move the needle. And I think when people think about, does their financial institution offer them a way to live a more sustainable, more green life? The answer for most people is no. And so we really want to shift the way that people think about what their bank could be and what their bank could offer them. And then lastly, I think it's just raising climate awareness in both big and small ways. I think that we want to encourage people to live greener lifestyles through their everyday spend, but also in other aspects of their life as well. And so we're excited to partner with various entities to encourage our users to do that in just a small way. So I'll talk a little bit about how we design sustainable products at Treecard and what we do sort of on an everyday basis. So let me dive in a little bit more into our physical product, which is going to be a debit card that plants trees every time you spend. So like I mentioned, each card is made from sustainably sourced cherry wood. We get a lot of questions, so I'll just sort of preempt them. We do get a lot of questions about, if you are trying to reforest the planet, why do you cut down trees to make your cards? It's a really good question. But for any of you in the audience who might be familiar with the payments industry, plastic is the most used and most common material that is used to make cards, credit cards, debit cards. Plastic is obviously the least sustainable option, but it is the most common. There are a number of financial institutions and card manufacturers that are now offering recycled plastic. Recycled plastic is not biodegradable. So unfortunately, when your card expires or if you lose it, it does end up sitting in a landfill. So it's more sustainable to produce, but it's less sustainable in the long run. And then a couple of card manufacturers use titanium cards or steel cards, very sort of high-end credit cards are made out of those materials, but those also require quite a bit of energy and materials from a supply chain perspective to make. So you think about what card can actually work at every merchant and every ATM worldwide, and what the supply chain has to offer. Wood is actually the most sustainable option. There are only I can count on one hand the number of card manufacturers in the world that produce a wooden card. So it's very few today. And we explicitly chose a manufacturer that produces the wood in a sustainable method. There are a couple that did not meet our sustainable standards. And so we're really excited to partner with the entity in the UK that provides the cards in a sustainable method. Just a little bit more about Treecard and our mission as well. One thing that we've chosen to do is reinvest 80% of our profits into climate change initiatives. So when people think about their bank and how Treecard makes money, every time you spend your money at a merchant with a Treecard, the merchant pays a small, what's called an interchange fee to accept that payment via card. And that interchange fee gets paid to the bank, to us. And we could keep all of it if we wanted to, but we don't want to. And most banks do keep all of it. They either use it for their own profits or they use it to make other investments. Some of the largest investments that financial institutions make are in the oil and gas industries. And we just fundamentally don't believe in that. And so what we'd like to do instead with the profits that we earn from all of our Treecard expenditures are reinvest them into other climate change initiatives with Ecosia and with other partners as well. We feel really passionately about that. And we are excited to be really transparent about how those investments are decided. We have a pretty ambitious product roadmap. So like I mentioned, we have to think about creating both physical and digital sort of sustainable products. I think a debit card is really just the first one on the roadmap. We're excited to launch that and then quickly explore other products that our user base has been asking for, like savings accounts, credit products, ethical lending for both individuals and businesses, as well as investments. Those are things that consumers are really keen to have when they think about their entire financial life, not just a spending card. And so I think there's ways to sort of greenify the entire banking industry. And we're excited to share sort of what will be coming soon from a product perspective. We've been able to drive a really excited user base thus far. We have over 160,000 people on our waitlist right now. We are launching in about a month in the US, so we're getting closer every day. We're really excited to see that happen. We haven't spent any money on paid advertising yet, and so we're really excited to know that a lot of people who are signing up are hearing from word of mouth. They're hearing from their friends and family, and so we've seen a ton of activity. And so we do feel like there is a real demand for this, both in the US, but in other countries as well, where I think people are just sort of waking up to the fact that the more types of products they can embed into their everyday life that will make a difference in the world, I think the better it could be. So we're excited for that. And I was asked to just share a couple of sustainable design tips. I know a lot of you in the audience are product designers, you maybe digital product designers. And so I wanted to just, the sort of last slide that I'll share is really just about some of the tips that we have, or some of the things that we do. I hope they can serve as tips for you. The first thing is Brainstorm. I know that sounds so simple, but we think really big at Treecard. We're sort of a small but mighty and ambitious team right now. And we have really wild brainstorming sessions, super out of the box. We push each other really hard to think sort of that nothing is impossible. So if we want to design a card, how can that card be sustainable? Everything from the chip inside the card to the hologram on the card. How can every moment of that entire experience be as sustainable as possible? So I would really encourage all of you to just push it to the edge and really think about how every moment could be as sustainable as possible. And we try to sort of first think of the bold and crazy concept, and then we try to think about how we can make it happen. Because I think that sort of cutting edge thinking is what really is going to help push people to the next level. I love what Cara said about thinking radically. I think that's what we try to do as well. The second tip that I have is really enlist your partners. And so depending on what type of product you're designing, even if it's a digital product or if it's a physical product, we've really tried to find partners that share the same passion for sustainability that we do and really understand what we're trying to get done. So for example, like I mentioned, our card manufacturer, it was hard to find someone that really sourced and produced the cards in the most sustainable method possible. But we did find them. So I think sometimes it takes a little bit more work, but it's not impossible. The packaging that our cards will arrive in the mail, the packaging sort of company that's producing that, and the ink that they're sourcing on the packaging is all going to be organic and sustainably sourced as well. And so we worked very hard sort of at every moment of the supply chain to find vendors and partners who have the materials and capabilities and passion for our mission as well. And so as you think about your entire journey and your entire product, it's not just you as a design team or you as an engineering team that needs to think sustainably, it's really everybody. And so find partners and vendors that support that mission, I think is important. I think this goes without saying, but of course we really think about accessibility testing at Treecard. We make sure that for our digital product, everything passes accessibility testing. I'm sure a lot of product designers know this, so it's probably a foundational tip, but that is something really important to us to make sure that everything we're doing, again, from a digital and physical perspective, is accessible to users of all types, all sort of walks of life. And then we focus from an engineering perspective as well. Something our engineering team is really dedicated on is sort of a mobile first approach. We try to leverage responsive web designs that load more quickly to save more energy. I think a lot of what Tom will be talking about next really focuses in on this tip as well. I think he's probably way more qualified to dive more deeply into it, but this is something that we try to adhere to at Treecard very, very much so. And then the last tip I have is to sort of test and track with your user base and with your end consumers or users, whoever they might be for your product, what aspects sort of sustainability resonate most with them. So for example, we've done a lot of user testing with our user base about the Treecard product to really understand what matters most to them. Does it matter the material of the actual physical card? Does it matter if when we ship the card to them, we're offsetting the carbon that's emitted from that shipping process? Does it matter to them that the card packaging is recyclable? Does it matter to them more sort of how Treecard is investing our profits and the climate change initiatives that we're focusing on? So really understanding what resonates and sort of goes the farthest with your user base, I think can help you justify the expenditures and the requirements that you might need as a business to make further investments in more sustainable decisions. Because at the end of the day, if you are trying to run a business, your bottom line matters. And so I think really understanding what resonates with your user base is what can help you sort of make the case to make even more sustainable decisions in the future. So those are just sort of some I would say tips, but also things that we think quite a bit about at Treecard. So that's really all I have. This is kind of our funny tagline that I want to share with you all, but that's the end of my presentation, and happy to answer questions. I believe they're coming mostly at the end, but that's all I had to share. And so I'm happy to pass it back to Anne.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and super inspiring talk. And I love your clarity and the simplicity of how you actually explain the credit card business model in such a simple way. It's not the easy thing to do. And I love the ambitions and the scale and the radical approach that you take to lead a really sustainability-led business such as Treecard. We do have a question in the audience. I forgot to mention that everyone, please feel free to come in the chat, drop your questions. Let's make it a discussion, a conversation. We do have the first question from Daniel. The question is, if Treecard is widely successful in 5 years' time, what does it look like?
Sure, that's a great question. That's like what I dream about every day. So it's a fun question to answer. I think, like I said, to me, sort of that North Star that really keeps me motivated every day is that goal that we have about shifting the paradigm. I think what I love about Treecard is we are helping people make sort of climate change actions based on really changing nothing at all. So we're not asking people to become vegetarians or stop taking planes or really shifting their entire life. We're simply telling them, you can spend money just as you spend it today. You can shop at any merchant you want. Just do it on a Treecard. And when you do it on a Treecard, we'll plant trees. And it's easy as that. And we have a reforestation partner who has a really long tenure in reforestation techniques and locations, and that's all you have to do. And so I think what really resonates with our user base is doing something simple that already fits within their life. And so in 5 years' time, if I could be as explosively successful as possible, I'd love to expand that into other products and services that really resonate with people. So this is a basic debit card, but people like to spend and save in all different ways, both individuals and businesses. So we've already had a couple of businesses reach out to us and say, I'd love to use this for my business, right? As a business, they have to, buy supplies and resources for their business. They would love to use something like this. So we have lots of ideas about sort of ethical credit products and ethical savings products and things that could really create an entire financial ecosystem for someone to adopt. And I want also to see, even if it's not Treecard, even if other sort of companies start popping up that offer something similar, I'd love to see that surge of demand from users who demand sort of a greener banking experience. I think that would be really exciting as well.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I love the fact that indeed you require zero change in the habits that people that do today. And here you go. We do have just one last question, time for one more question. I think there's a question from Ashley. How will you show your users that you are doing what you say you are? For example, planting these trees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. And that's something that we think quite a bit about. What I love about working at Treecard from a product perspective is I have this dual challenge. This is a banking app. It's a financial app. It's a debit card. And so most people are used to, within their banking app, seeing, I would say, what you would probably basically expect. You expect to see your balance, your list of transactions, your monthly statements. And so from a product perspective, we need to make sure that all of that is super easy, really intuitive. If you need customer service help, if you need to, email yourself a statement, we need to make sure that that's all easy, clear, simple to view and understand and consume. But we have this focus on reforestation and on tree planting. And so we want to make sure, and that's a huge reason why people sign up for Treecard. And so we want people to see front and center within the app how many trees they've planted. And we are also building out some sort of sections within the app and different features and functionalities that will allow people not just to see the number of trees that they've planted, but as much or as little detail as they would care to consume. So where those trees are planted, which country, what variety of trees have been planted, what techniques were used, how much carbon did those trees capture. So as much detail as a user would use, we want to make that really digestible and sort of consumable, like tidbits about the reforestation, because even if someone is very savvy about tree planting, we want to make it feel like they can see the trees that they're planting and they can really visualize and feel connected to that impact. It's not easy, but it's something that we're very dedicated to doing because I think that will resonate quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely. It's especially to actually see what it actually means in a very human or understandable way. So you don't have to have a degree to understand what your impact is.
Yeah.
Well, that's really, really human from you to take care to that level of detail. Really wanted to give a huge round of applause to Jessica, and thank you so much for giving your time and also inspiring all of us from the story that you shared just now.
Yeah.
With that being said, the time is ticking, and I'd love to introduce our next guest speaker. Tom Greenwood is a managing director in Wholegrain Digital, and he's going to share us the practical tips how to actually build faster, more carbon efficient websites that are better for the planet, for the people. We've had Tom actually within our community already, and we loved him so much that we had to actually invite him back and share this story with the wider community. So here you go, Tom, all over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Before I start, I also just want to say I'm super excited about Treecard, and I hope it's not too long before Treecard comes to the UK with business banking services, because we have a serious shortage of ethical, sustainable options here. So you've got a customer waiting over here. So I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of low carbon web design in 10 minutes. So top level, not super detailed, but I really hope that there's some things in here that you guys as designers will find useful. So very quickly, just to get started, a lot of people don't really necessarily associate digital services with environmental impact. And certainly, like when I started my agency, one of the reasons why I got into digital was because I thought, okay, this is great. I can move away from industrial design into designing things that have no environmental impact. Like, they don't really exist. And one of the things that I've been surprised by and learned over the years is that actually the internet shouldn't be a surprise, but it is. Like, it's not virtual. It's a physical machine. It's the biggest machine that humans have ever created. It spans the entire planet. There are billions of connected devices. There are thousands of data centers. There are vast quantities of cabling connecting all of these devices. Just the cables in the ocean can go to the moon, I think, 3 times and back. So there's, it's a very, very physical machine, and it's using electricity 24 hours a day, all of these parts. And when you equate that electricity consumption into carbon emissions, it's really surprising how much that adds up. So on an annual basis, it's roughly equivalent to Germany, which I think is currently the 7th biggest polluter in the world. And it's also roughly equivalent to global aviation, which a lot of us would intuitively think of aviation as being a very polluting industry, and would think of digital as being a very non-polluting industry. But actually, they're very, very similar in terms of their total annual emissions, which is really surprising. The good thing, however, is that the internet is a lot easier to decarbonize than aviation, and there's really simple, like, low-hanging fruit of things that we can do. And when we do so, there are some real benefits. One of them is obviously the environmental benefit of reduced energy usage, and with that, reduced carbon emissions. But also, when we pursue efficiency, energy efficiency in digital services, we tend to get, as a side effect, like, improved performance, and in many cases, improved user experience as well. So there's some real, like, good commercial benefits and social benefits to looking at this. So what can designers do? So the first thing might seem like it has nothing to do with the environment, but good UX is actually good for the environment. And in particular, streamlining user journeys is really, really important. So every time somebody has to, like, load data, click through to a page, or just spend time looking at something, trying to figure out what they're supposed to do, trying to find where is the information I'm looking for. All of that time and all of that additional data loaded through poor user experience is consuming energy, both in terms of, like, the actual data transfer, but also on the end user's device. So really good streamlined user journeys are good for the user, and they're good for the environment. And this is just one little example that I personally like, which is the Ajax shopping cart on the Finisterre website, where you don't have to keep clicking back and forth to the shopping cart page to remind yourself what you've already got in your basket. But the basket is always just there. It can just slide in and out on the page at any point. So nice little touches like that can really streamline user journeys and save energy in the process. So getting into, like, the visual side of design, photographs tend to be the biggest source of data consumption on most websites, and the same would be true for most apps as well. And so just thinking about how we can get rid of photographs without losing visual appeal is one, like, simple way of trying to reduce data consumption and reduce energy consumption. So thinking about how you can use CSS effects, how you can use typography, how you can use SVG, vector graphics, which tends to be far smaller in terms of their data consumption, but can be really powerful from a visual design point of view. So using that lens of, like, how can we minimize photographs is a really, really effective thing to do. Now, that said, obviously there's lots of use cases where photographs are necessary or beneficial, and we don't want to lose them completely. So optimizing photographs is really, really important. And we can do this partly just through like careful selection of images and sizing them in their pixel dimensions to make sure that we're not loading images bigger than they're going to be displayed. But then we can also optimize them further by choosing the right file type. So, JPEGs tend to be smaller than PNGs for photographs, but then WebP is even smaller than JPEG. And AVIF is a new file format that seems to be getting adopted quite quickly by browsers, which is even smaller than WebP, really, really efficient file format. But we can also look at things like depth of field or just like creative effects in the image. So you'll see these two images. The one on the right is the same pixel dimensions, but it's almost half the size in terms of its file size. It's 192 kilobytes versus 360. And the only difference is that the edge of the right-hand image is blurred. And by blurring the edge of the image, we actually lose information, we lose data, and that makes the file size smaller. So this is just, I've roughly done this in Photoshop, but you could do this in art direction of actually specifying we want shallow depth of field images, which look great and have smaller files. Or you could, as a designer, you can cut objects out, put them on simplified backgrounds rather than having detailed backgrounds for the whole image. So that art direction aspect also has an impact on file size, which has an impact on energy. And just one last thing, also, like just desaturating is another way of losing data and making the file smaller. So black and white or any kind of monochrome option is a nice thing to consider. Also on images, just think carefully about carousels, because carousels can be often like not that great from a user experience point of view, but they also require us to load data that we might never even see. Like here we have 3 slides. There's a good chance that the user will never see slides 2 and 3, and yet there's a full width photograph on both of those slides. And so moving away from carousels, or if you are going to use a carousel, like designing it really carefully so that actually it provides, like, you make sure that all of the content is really visible, really engaging, and the user is going to get value out of all of the stages. Means that you're making the most of that data, and you're not just wasting it by loading it when nobody's going to see it. Now, although images are a big source of data usage on most websites, if you are going to use video, then video kind of blows it all out the water. Videos consume huge amounts of data, and as a result also consume a lot of energy. So the single best thing you can do is avoid autoplay. So like autoplay video backgrounds, which are not just bad for the environment, but they're bad for the user. If the user's like particularly low income groups who have like pay-as-you-go data that's really expensive for them, and they load your web page, and that video is burning through their data usage. So avoiding autoplay is good for people and planet. And then other than that, you can also compress your video files, like standard things that you would do, but also like stream at the lowest definition you can get away with, and keep them concise, keep the content of those videos as short as possible. And you'll minimize the energy use. You can also replace videos with animation. And there's a little example here of an interactive web animation, which is about 500 kilobytes. So it's really small compared to a video, which would have been at least 10 times the size in terms of data consumption, but it has some real advantages. Not only does it use less data, it's more SEO friendly because the text in the animation is real text readable by search engines. It's also more accessible because of that real text that can be read by a screen reader. And there's a controllable timeline, which is good for user experience, because if people are trying to learn something, they can skip through at their own pace rather than having to watch a whole video just to find out whether or not it's useful to them. So interactive animations are a really good alternative to video for some types of content. And this is generated as an After Effects animation and exported to Lottie, which is an open source library that you can use. Yes. There we go. So the next thing I would suggest is low energy colors. And on OLED screens, this is only relevant to OLED screens, but that's becoming pretty much the standard technology of a lot of new devices. So smartphones, laptops, tablets, smart TVs are moving to OLED. And an OLED technology basically means that each pixel lights up individually. And that means that white uses the most energy, because if you had a white screen, you're lighting up all of the light bulbs. And black uses almost no energy, because all the light bulbs are switched off. So you don't have to necessarily go full black, but any form of darkening that you can use, like kind of non-white backgrounds, for example, will help save energy on the end user's device. It's also good for the user, because if it's a mobile device, you help save them battery usage and extend their battery life as well. Fonts are another thing that you can compress. So just like system fonts are free from an energy and data point of view. WAF2 is much smaller than TTF files, and just use less font weights in your designs, or variable fonts if you need lots of font weights, and subsetting fonts where you strip out all the characters that are never going to be used. Is a really great way of, like, you can save sort of 95% of the data just by subsetting fonts to the languages that you're going to use. So that's one thing to consider. So a couple of last things. If you want to play around, get a sense of the carbon footprint of a website, or any web page for that matter, you can use websitecarbon.com, which is a tool that we created a few years ago, and you can just pop a URL in there and get an estimate. It's quite fun to play around with, and also test other websites that you like. Safari Energy Impact in the Safari browser is kind of a cool tool to test CPU energy on an end user's device, and test things like animation effects, like load-in effects, hover effects, and find out whether they're consuming a lot of energy on the end user's device. So you can find that in dev tools in Safari. And then finally, my book, Sustainable Web Design, goes into a lot more detail than what I can go into in 10 minutes, and is available from abookapart.com. And it actually starts in its introduction with talking about Victor Papanek and how his work in sustainable design back in the 70s, and his writing that he did in the 70s really inspired me in my journey as a designer. Obviously, I didn't read it in the 70s, but I was really pleased to see Kara's quote from Victor Papanek at the beginning, because he's a real hero of sustainable design, and I think there's a lot of wisdom that we can still learn from today in the digital world. So that is where I'm going to leave it, and see if, I don't know if we've got time for any questions.
Yes, we do. And thank you so much, Tom. This has been so helpful and so insightful, especially for the designers, or for anyone like me, was so passionate about the topic, but lack confidence, lack knowledge, like no idea how to actually do. But all of the tips you've mentioned about blurring the edges on the photos, like desaturating, streamlining user journeys, it doesn't cost me as a designer anything. So I can already do that like literally tomorrow. So lovely. Love the practical tips and angle to this challenge, and hope that anyone in the audience, if you are from Netflix, please stop the autoplay.
Yeah,
it's just crazy. It's quite annoying, but also the green element of it, you could definitely make a change. We do have a question from Daniel. So Daniel has a question is, hey, Tom, how do you actually explain or sell this stuff to the clients? This is probably particularly relevant to us who are more on the consultancy side and have to actually influence, nudge, or somehow convince our clients that this is a good thing to do.
Yeah, I think the key thing is to introduce them to the topic, which there's a good chance they won't even be familiar with the fact that there's a environmental impact from digital. But to get them motivated, like really focus on the non-environmental benefits, like the commercial benefits. At the end of the day, what you're doing is you're using sustainability as a lens through which to pursue efficiency. And when you do that, you are going to make things faster, which everybody loves. You can save them money potentially on like hosting costs if you make things super efficient. You can improve search rankings if you make things faster. You can improve accessibility. Like there's a whole bunch of commercial benefits. And I think really focusing on those means that even if they're not interested in the sustainability side, there's a good chance that they'll say, okay, well, this is good for me, so I'm on board, because there's no downside.
Really no downside, and bringing that awareness. That's really good tip. Thank you, Tom. We do have another question from the audience. This is from Karen. Thank you, Tom. What about text animation with system fonts?
Ooh.
Really going deep.
That's really interesting. I think like CSS animations tend to be really low energy. So I think that would be a super efficient way of like creating movement on a site with very little energy usage. But it's funny how like different animation effects have different energy impacts, and it's not always predictable what's what. So I would recommend using that Safari browser energy impact tool and testing different animation effects on the typography and just see what impact they have.
Yeah, definitely. So actually just through testing experiments to get a
Exactly.
complete answer around it, isn't it? I do have to apologize to James. I skipped your question. You came first. So question from James. Any tips for balancing the energy used in production of some of these techniques with end web traffic?
I'm not sure which type of production James means. So I'm not sure whether James means producing like the infrastructure of like building the internet and all of the devices that we hold, or whether James means like our energy of, of like the office energy of like designing and building web services. So it's a hard question to answer without being sure of that. But essentially, if it's the office energy, then I think like you can do both. Like we should all be looking to reduce our own emissions from like how we work, basically, as well as reduce energy of our applications. If it's the more of the infrastructure side of things, generally speaking, I don't know if this answers the question, but generally speaking, if you're going to like process data, it's more efficient to do it in a data center than on an end user device like a smartphone. And the actual like manufacturing energy relative to the computational power of a data center versus an end user device is lower for the data center. So if you have to make a choice between like, where are we going to crunch data? Are we going to do it in a data center, or are we going to get the end user's laptop or phone to do it? Generally, like pushing things to the data center is going to be the lowest energy, both in terms of its manufacturing and of the energy used to do the calculations. So I don't know if that answers the question, because I wasn't quite sure what the question was asking, but hopefully that's useful.
Well done navigating ambiguity through the answer. With that being said, I wanted to say thank you so much, Tom, for giving us your precious time, for giving you so many practical tips. Anyone who hasn't added the book into the read list or to buy list, please do. And with that, I just wanted to actually give you a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to actually, with the time that we have left, to introduce our last but not least of the speaker. This is a homegrown talent. Zoe is a product designer here at Frog, and she is going to present to us how she connects the dots between behavioral science and sustainability, and shows the practice of self-reflection that can help us become better and more sustainable designers. This is the result of her master's degree, I believe, and she has created the whole framework herself. So I'll give it to Zoe.
Thanks, Anne. Hi all, I'm Zoe. I'm a product designer at Frog. I'll be sharing 3 methods that will help you become a more sustainable designer. This approach is deeply rooted in leadership theory and the process of cybernetics, which is essentially feedback loops. It's the MVP thinking we're all familiar with, but applied to our lives and environment. I'll be running through the exercises with myself as an example, my annual footprint, the Self-Sustainment Canvas, and designing the designer. I wrote this 4 years ago and have been implementing a form of this approach in my life since then. I can honestly say I'm not the same person. By taking an honest look at where I am in life daily, monthly, and yearly, I've been able to overcome things I would previously ignore. To run through it all would be a whole other talk, but I want to let you know that I've used it and this works. And for me, becoming a sustainable designer has been sharing this methodology. It's a goal I'm ticking off my list today. By digging where you stand, you take control of what you can control. You use yourself as a testing bed for behavior change. And by walking the walk, you can then lead others. You can demonstrate how these changes have helped your well-being, reduced your impacts on the world, and freed up your time. It focuses on the small things. The gardener in this illustration is someone with the capacity to recognize the whole system. They know the real work is in preparing the environment. They are not responsible for making the plants grow, but can create the optimum environment for their success. As designers and decision makers, we can learn to garden our lives as well as our work and processes. The work of the gardener is called the inside-out approach. It allows us to explore our aspirations, personality, and motivations. It lays the foundation for dealing with external achievements, such as running an organization or following a certain career path. In undergoing this process, we're inevitably choosing the path of a responsible leader, a person who has done the work to align internal and external ambition, which ultimately creates a successful approach to life. This work is hard. It takes a trial and error approach, but if we keep setting small goals and reaching them over time, we will always improve and change for the better. This cyclical approach is called Cybernetics and is common to many growth or improvement methodologies. Cybernetics is used to measure changes in systems or organizations and is commonly associated with software development, bringing value early and reducing wasted time and effort. It is also a key aspect of sustainable design for tracking the unintended effects of human impact on the environment, and can even be used in personal development to analyze life choices and set goals to get moving in the right direction. In a similar way, everything we design needs to be measured and iterated over time and forever in a cyclical approach. It is the price we pay for our time on this planet, to not let any unintended consequences slip under the radar. No one intended to destroy the planet, to create global warming, or disrupt our ecosystems. These are unintended consequences, and now we know we can do better. When we analyze and measure a system, we are taking control of these unintended consequences, recognizing early when we are going off course and adjusting as necessary. In order to give you an example, I'm going to tell you about Operation Cat Drop. In 1950s Borneo, the Dayak people suffered an outbreak of malaria caused by mosquitoes. The UN liberally sprayed the area with DDT and the mosquitoes died, but the roofs of people's homes started to collapse. The DDT had also killed the wasps, which previously kept the thatch-eating caterpillars under control. Many now poisonous insects were eaten by the cats, and they eventually died. Without the cats, so began an outbreak of rats, spreading typhus and plague. In a ditch attempt to reset the equilibrium, the World Health Organization delivered 14,000 cats. The population of rats decreased, and so began the road to recovery. Whilst this may seem like an edge case, this true story illustrates that problems can occur from the solutions we design. Life is interconnected, and we must observe this in the world as well as our own lives. As designers and people who make decisions, we are part of the problem and the solution, creator and destructor all at the same time. We have designed the human experience from the products we buy, the services we use, and the interactions we have with others. We are designed whether we know it or not. The exercises I have developed help us recognize this in ourselves and find ways to unpick the unconscious conditioning we have experienced from the world around us. So let's get into the methods. I'll use myself as an example, but I know you don't care about my goals, and your goals are personal. You don't need to justify them. Change is hard, but to live life with intention is just as hard as living without it, so may as well give it a go. I spent about 30 minutes filling this out, but that would be required weekly, monthly, yearly for these changes to truly take effect. And ultimately, navigating this path is our life's work. Another thing worth mentioning, I'm very lucky to be optimizing my life at this level. You'll see my challenges are things like what energy provider to use, how to shop at places that aren't the norm, or avoid choices made out of convenience. I have a lot of freedoms, a regular salary, and live a fairly stable life despite everything going on, and I know not everyone is in the same position. So let's start with the annual footprint. This is an opportunity to look at your lifestyle and measure your impact across a range of categories. It's less about accuracy and more about acknowledgement of where your time, energy, and money are going. Think about what you could do to redirect your current habits towards a better quality of life for yourself, others, and the environment as a whole. What we all find after completing this is that no one's perfect. We are all unsustainable because of the designed environment we live in. As one of the many things I identified on this map is my plastic consumption in the things I buy frequently. I'm guilty of buying my vegetables in plastic containers, cleaning products in plastic, and my online shopping arrives in plastic. I know I can go to the package-free store, but why do I find this so daunting? I might have to ask to weigh everything. What if I can't shut off the dispenser and spill pasta everywhere? How can I avoid choices made out of convenience and do the right thing? How do you mitigate your plastic consumption? How have you reduced it in your work and the things you design? What are some of your main pain points, if not plastic consumption? Please put it in the chat. Next is the Self-Sustainment Canvas. I pulled out 8 categories to help segment what makes up a balanced life. How closely aligned are you with your core values in each of these categories? This is a chance to identify what your core values are and reflect on how all aspects of your life are interconnected. You can see from my map that I'm not yet at the bullseye. I've got work to do and I'm continually improving. I won't go through every segment, but to briefly elaborate on career, as this talk is ultimately aimed at redirecting our design approach. As of today, I'm 4 months into my new job as a product designer at Frog. I've shared my methodology with the design team and I'm now talking at Pi People. I'm glad to be progressing in life and work. I'm continually learning and enjoying my career. I see potential ways to get more involved in sustainability at work and would like to do more of it. I do run a project outside of work called Share My Garden, which is a neighbourhood gardening network, and this has always been a great outlet for me. How do I make more room for this in my day-to-day? I think a lot of us are asking the same question. And finally, designing the designer. Reflect on your self-sustainment canvas and your annual footprint. What needs to change in terms of career, business, and lifestyle for you to become more sustainable by design? What are your long-term aspirations versus the things you can start today? Break down long-term goals into smaller habits to make the things you can start today simple and achievable. On the top are my 3 goals that are more important to me at work. I'll focus on sustainable design, which is genuinely a goal of mine, and I've discussed it with my development manager. Using this canvas, I first wrote my long-term goals in the right-hand column. I have 2 more articles to write. What I'm talking about today is part of a broader methodology. I would like to find opportunities to optimize our design system, following what I've learned from Tom's book. I would like to seek opportunities to implement regenerative and circular business models for our clients in a similar way to Treecard. I then worked backwards and I filled out the left-hand column. In order to write my articles, I'll write 30 minutes a day, set myself a deadline. That's how I wrote the article that accompanies this talk. In order to optimize our design system for sustainability, I'll start with one task, optimizing our images. Knowing that I've outsourced this and that it has such a big impact, I have to bring it into the design process. I will build further habits from there. In order to implement regenerative business models with our clients, I will look at others who are doing this, read blogs like Green Biz and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation resources to familiarize myself with what is happening in this area. By breaking down our longer-term goals into daily habits, we can rely on the compound effect to get us there. Just as a designer creates a brand vision for the new experience, we must create that vision for ourselves on paper. Adjust as we go, The habits are tests, and if it works, we will continue. If not, we will have to pivot, but keep that long-term goal in mind. Remember, it's all about the cyclical and iterative process of cybernetics. Over time, we will become the designer we designed on paper. So from everything you've heard today, how can you change your habits starting tomorrow or tonight? How can you be that sustainable designer with one small change? Please put it in the chat. We'd love to know what has stood out to you the most. If you'd like to know more about these methods, visit the IDM blog for the full article, where you can also download a PDF. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter if this has helped you. I'd love to hear about the changes you're making. Thank you for listening and helping me reach my goal today. And that's it.
Oh, well done. Thank you so much, Zoe. You should be very proud of yourself. Just joined the company 4 months ago and you have wrote an article. You're already here in the pipe, people sharing your story, an incredible framework. Particularly loved your designing the designer template, as it makes the whole big challenge a little bit more digestible. And it's really come from the small changes or small new habits that everyone can embark to live a greener lifestyle. We'd love to hear your questions if anyone has any. As everyone is probably being left and probably already self-reflecting based on what you've mentioned, Zoe, I do have a starter question for you. As part of this framework that you've developed, what are the new habits, more of like a small changes that you have acquired very recently? Could you share some?
Yeah, I think in terms of looking at my life holistically, I very much try to switch off at the end of the day. I'm very habit focused, so daily I'm doing 10,000 steps. I monitor my exercise, my diet, I track, and the effects of that have been amazing in a way. I've ended up getting very fit during lockdown and really focusing in on the things that I can control. And day to day, particularly just doing this talk, I have actually started to track my plastic consumption. I've actually changed my habits around where I shop. I'm trying to buy those least vegetables, trying to shop less reactively online. And all these little things, they do make a difference.
Oh, you are. Thank you very much for sharing, and thank you for inspiring all of us. Definitely not getting fitter through pandemic, so definitely have to discipline myself to at least reach 10,000 steps a day. So thank you very much. And we have seeing that audience is sharing the fact that they started growing their own salad to avoid packaged salad, and on all of this little new habits that they that all of us can do, really. There is a question from Thais. Do you use some behavior change techniques?
Yeah, I do. Part of it is really around routines. I love the book Tiny Habits. There's techniques around anchoring habits to things you already do. A lot of the time, I build habits around waking up. So I'm up really early, and I usually journal, and that's a big part of my morning routine. And I think a lot of my behavior change stems from that. Often journal in the morning and the evening, and it doesn't take very long, can be about 15 minutes. but to journal in the evening and wake up with intention of what I'm going to do the next day has probably been the most transformative. And I only set 3 things that I'm going to do the next day. I usually do more than 3 things a day, but there are 3 frogs. So I have to eat those frogs that day, and I'll try and eat the biggest frog first. And that's usually my attitude day by day. If I can get those 3 things done, I'm usually pretty satisfied with my day.
Thank you so much. Well done, John. Definitely, you are a true inspiration, as Imogen says, and I totally agree. Keep on marching on this journey and inspire all of us to join the march with you. With that, big, huge round of applause to our homegrown talent, Zoe Lester, product designer here at Frog. Thank you so much. Before we close off, we see that the chat has been super busy. Thank you for everyone who stayed with us as far. I do want to acknowledge there are some questions from the audience that we didn't have the time to pick up. And if you're still here, feel free to stay around, hang around, ask a few more questions. We do have 5 or 10 minutes or so. So let's go back to the speakers. We welcome Tom and Jessica back in the room. The first question that we have is actually the question to Jess. So this is a question from Eva. Love the idea and the focus on what matters to users. So the question is, how do you prioritize when the features that matter most to users aren't the ones that drive the needle the most for sustainability?
Yeah, I saw that, Eva. Great question. I think it goes a little bit to what I was talking about, this sort of dual challenge that we have at Treecard. And this is also really fresh on my mind because we've just come off of 2 weeks of some user testing sessions, which is always really fun for me to talk to real consumers. We've been giving people sort of a sneak peek of the full app and getting their feedback. And there really is, and I don't know if this is a cultural thing because all of the users I spoke to are American, but like I mentioned, there's a really big focus on the banking features within the app. So people are keen to see, what does my monthly statement look like? How am I going to contact customer service? So the nature of the product definitely requires us to focus on the types of product features that make sure people feel safe and secure and comfortable and at ease with their banking product. I mean, this is people's money, so they want to make sure it's very safe and very secure. And so prioritizing those features is very important to us. But the sustainability and the impact features are really almost equally as important. What we did hear a lot from users was the question similar to what someone else asked about, how do you track the trees and how do you visualize where they're planted? I think something we're really cognizant of is making sure that people don't lose that sense of connection to that impact and that they don't sort of forget about it. And so how can we, we'll certainly be testing a bunch of different things to make people feel connected to it. And it's hard to say at this moment, right? We haven't gone live yet. So we have a bunch of ideas and a bunch of things we've already heard that people want to see. But I think a lot of it is just testing and learning from a sustainability perspective what really matters for people. And we've heard different things from different people, but I would say the top things that we've heard that we're really going to prioritize are making people feel like they have a really consumable and easy to understand way to identify sort of where we're planting trees and how we're planting trees. And that, in fact, we are planting trees with their purchases. So that's sort of the things that we'll definitely be prioritizing in our earliest version.
Yeah, definitely. Especially that's essentially what makes your business so different from others. Thank you so much for such an insightful answer. And on kind of very similar note, a question from Karen is, how does Treecard pick where or which country do you plant the trees in? Is it typically within North America, or do you venture outside and do it somewhere else?
Yeah, so we really rely on Ecosia to help us with all of the reforestation logistics. But I guess I would say at a high level, we plant trees where they're needed most. So there's certain areas in the world where deforestation has been a huge problem. So if you think of places like the Amazon and Brazil, there are places in specific countries where reforestation is really, or deforestation rather, is really disrupting ecosystems. So both animal ecosystems and human ecosystems. It's uprooting entire livelihoods. It's impacting economies. It's impacting families for whatever reason. And so Ecosia really focuses on setting up those tree planting locations where they are needed and where planting trees will make the biggest difference. Some of them are right in North America. So unfortunately in North America, especially on the West Coast, there have been a bunch of fires that have totally sort of ruined entire landscapes in Oregon and in California. And so Ecosia has reforestation efforts in those states. But then they also have reforestation efforts in places that you might sort of suspect, like South America, like I mentioned in the Amazon. There are a lot of reforestation sites also in West Africa, places where there have been sort of environmental reasons why trees have not sort of thrived. So what we really love about them as a partner is they have such deep and intimate knowledge about where trees will make the most difference and sort of the techniques and the varieties that will make the most difference as well. So definitely, again, I would like plug the sort of browsing through their website, but also this is the type of like tips and stuff that you'll see within the Treecard app as well.
Yeah, definitely, and especially it makes a difference when there's a global warming and the fires is going to be more of a new normal. Hey, thank you so much, and really love your approach. There's now we have the last questions actually from Fiona to Tom. Any recommendations for hosting providers that are more sustainable? Could you shed some light?
Yeah, so there's quite a few, increasingly so, that are really good. As sort of general ones in the UK, Cayenne, Positive Internet are a couple of good ones. And if you're using WordPress, then basically like raid boxes in Germany, really, really good. And anything that piggybacks off Google data centers. Google, out of the big companies, has got seems to have the strongest approach to renewable energy and energy efficiency at the moment. So there's a lot of services like Kinsta, WP Engine, and so on that piggyback off their data centers, which is good. But I'd also recommend looking at the Green Web Foundation website, because they have like a big database of all of the data centers that have registered with them to say that they are either using 100% renewable energy or they are like certified carbon neutral. So like go and have a look for your country and find the providers listed there. It's a good starting point.
Excellent, thank you. You're so knowledgeable in this matter. I feel like you always give like very detailed that you know your subject so well. Thank you so much, Tom, and really lovely having all of three of you joining tonight the Pi People event and making it so special. I'd like to, on that note, to actually close the event and thank you for all the audience participation. Especially love your questions and your engagement so far. Hopefully we had inspired you, given you the practical tips, the frameworks, even potentially had provoked you, or even just give you some food for thought for tomorrow, future days to come on this very important topic. And please stay in touch. Let us know how the event went. Give us some feedback, and we'd love to see you in our future events. Stay safe and thank you.